Hello chess friends and welcome to Qe2 Chess channel and welcome back to our little computer chess world. Welcome back to our series commented chess games played by top engines, and today we're continuing our series again with some healthy openings, because recently we have covered some sharp and wild openings like the King's Gambit, Danish Gambit, and many of the sick tactical openings. Today we're continuing with the healthy stuff again. Today we're continuing with the normal stuff like the Queen's Gambit decline, the Ruy Lopez, the Italian game, maybe the Nmd2 Indian. These are of course the most popular openings, and I found really a brilliant game here played by Stockfish 14 against another top engine Houdini in a closed Ruy Lopez, because the Ruy Lopez is of course the most popular opening in top grandmaster level. Whenever a top grandmaster is trying to battle it out against another top grandmaster, most of the times we'll see a struggle and a battle in the Ruy Lopez. So that's why I think it's a decent opening that we should study more and more, because it's really the most often played opening in top grandmaster level. So let's check out now the game. This is not maybe the most attractive game, I have to warn you, but I really love these games where maybe one slight inaccuracy can cost you the game, when maybe occupying one square in the center of the board means really much in the continuation of the game, when maybe one positional trade of pieces can cost you the game. So this kind of games I really love, because when the game is tactical, then my analysis is simple like this, you know, what happens if that happens, what happens if that happens. So the tactical games, I think we don't understand so much, because of course you can use some computer analysis for yourself at home. When it comes to strategical brilliances, then I love really to cover these games, because they're meeting with the most important strategical element, the most important strategical principles in chess, and that are basically the games that I really like to analyze here on my YouTube chess channel, and that's a game that we're analyzing today. So let's check out now the game here. Stockfish 14 with the white pieces open with the move e4. We have e5 by Houdini, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to b5. We have now the Spanish game, the Ruy Lopez, and here after move a6 we have now the so-called Morphy defense after bishop to a4, which is now the most popular way to proceed here. You can also go into the exchange variation. We'll analyze of course the exchange variation also further in our Ruy Lopez series. After move bishop to a4 we have now knight to f6, and now after casting, basically Black is now making a decision. Black is making now a decision if this game is going to be closed with bishop to e7, or if it's going to be maybe an open Ruy Lopez with the move knight to e4. After move knight to e4, the game leads now into this line with the move d4. So also it's something worth to study, this particular line. But here in the continuation, Houdini choose to play the closed Ruy Lopez with the move bishop to e7. We have now rook to e1, normal stuff, protecting now the e4 pawn. And now after b5 we have bishop to b3, and now we have kingside castling by this other engine Houdini. Now comes really one of the most important moments also in the Ruy Lopez continuation. Now you have to again make a decision, because if you play c3 in order to maybe break the position with the move d4 and similar stuff, then you could meet maybe the martial attack here from Black's perspective. I really like the martial attack. There are plenty games in which Black is destroying White in the martial attack. Here it's really a wild game after potential e takes d5, knight to d5, and basically what Black is doing here is sacrificing a pawn. After knight to e5, knight takes e5, rook to e5, and then c6 would be the most popular continuation here for Black. And okay, White has here an extra pawn, but the problem is of course White's lack of development. The problem is now all of these pieces are not playing. The bishop is a little bit blocked out by this knight. We have to also notice it, because there's no way that White is going to give up such a sharp bishop like this on b3 for just a knight in the center of the board. I'm not sure if anyone would do that. So that's why here the activity that Black gains for the sacrifice pawn is, I think, good compensation. But that's why after move casting, as we said, if you try c3 you will probably meet the martial attack. So that's why here Stockfish played the so-called anti-martial system with the move a4. With the move a4, now d5 is not an option anymore, because you get simply a takes b5, and you could lose here the battle also on the a file. So that's why here we have bishop to b7, connecting now the queen with the rook. If you want to take now a takes b5, it's not such a good continuation, I think, here for white after 8x b5. Okay, maybe some pieces can be traded off, but now even with, I don't know, maybe with queen to a8 here, black has a decent game, and here black has already, I think, a nice pressure against the e4 pawn. So that's why trading off here is not an option in the continuation. Stockfish played now the move d3, kept the tension here on the queen side because no one wants to take here. Actually 8x b5 we saw is not a good idea, and even if black plays something like b takes a4, again it's not so good. I think with rook to a4 the rook can come very active into the game. And when we watch now the pawn structure in this scenario, I think white is much better because of a much healthier pawn structure. All of these pawns you see are connected, so it means it would be sort of one pawn island. And when we watch now black's pawn structure, we have now 2 pawn islands. It's of course this isolated pawn on a6, and also this pawn chain of 6 pawns would be then this other pawn island. But in the continuation of the game, I think white has now a normal strategy. White will simply continue the pressure against this isolated pawn on a6, would maybe double up the rooks on the a file, include maybe more pieces in the attack in order just to attack this weak pawn. I think, as I said, from this point on, white has really a comfortable and calm game. So that's why I've removed d3. Black is keeping also the tension, it's never touching anything here on the queen side. Plays now the move d6, and now knight to d2. We have now knight to a5, and now bishop to a2. It seems so that this is wrong maybe for black, pardon me, for white here, because b takes a4 can be played. But again, even if you grab this pawn temporarily, of course it's a long-term weakness. In one particular moment white will find a way to attack further the pawn on a4. These are again isolated pawns, nothing grammatically is changed. We can take afterwards this pawn, and again this pawn on a6 will be then a weakness. And exactly a similar position will apply, because after move here bishop to a2, c5 was played by Houdini, and now knight to f1, and finally Houdini decided to play the move b takes a4. And okay, Houdini has now an extra pawn. Now it's time to regroup. But Stockfish had, I think, here really a great positional idea in mind. Stockfish plays now really a simple bad bishop strategy. That's exactly what I wanted to see. I really wanted to see this brilliant strategies played by top engines. We can see many times Stockfish calculating everything from the beginning till the end with some wild tactics. We have seen even, I don't know, Immortal 15 move forced checkmate tactical sequence. We have seen really the wildest games. But now Stockfish shows basically its great positional skills. Here Stockfish plays now the move bishop to g5, and actually we can notice that this is a simple bad bishop strategy. What Stockfish is trying to do is of course to occupy first of all this weak square on d5, and now Stockfish is getting rid of any defender of the d5 square, which is of course first of all the knight. And what Stockfish is also trying to do is to play bishop to f6. After bishop to f6, we can notice that this bishop would be blocked out by its own pawn structure, so that's why we call it a bad bishop. And this strategy that Stockfish is playing now is simply a bad bishop strategy. So that's why brilliant stuff here. Even if you try maybe something like knight to d5, maybe to simplify the game, you will not lose decisive material here from black's perspective, but I think you're positionally lost, because after bishop to d5 you can play bishop takes g5. We can take out this one, you can take out this one also on b7, but again I think the knights are much better than the bishop here. In one particular moment we can play knight to e3, and then knight to d5 or knight to c4. All of the squares in black's camp will be simply occupied, and in one particular moment we can play c3, maybe grab our pawn back, and again simply continue our pressure on the a file with some rook activities, with the queen rook battery, or maybe with double rook battery on the a file. So this continuation is simply again not good. Although in this scenario maybe black's dark bishop is attacking here the center of the board, but basically it's aiming into air, it's not attacking anything. So one of the best ideas how to play also against such a bishop is simply get out of the range of the bishop, not placing any pieces on the squares. And also knight to g3, knight to f5 are also opportunities in this particular continuation. So I think black is simply strategically lost. The engine gives you already a +1 evaluation for white. So after move bishop to g5, here Stockfish is announcing a great, as I said, bad bishop strategy. We have bishop to c6, bishop to f6, bishop to f6, and then we have said we're simply batting for the d5 square. We have now bishop to d5, because what Stockfish doesn't want to get is maybe a d5 move and then maybe e4. in order to sacrifice maybe one pawn, but to liberate finally the dark square bishop, because if that happens, then this bishop is perfectly fine, then this bishop is active again. So that's why Stockfish is paralyzing this position immediately. Bishop to d5, we have bishop takes d5, e takes d5, and maybe this idea could work, but then simply I think here d takes e4, and even if you take out this one, still rook to a4, and one particular moment I think you have to escape with the bishop, and I think again somehow maybe to play something like, I don't know, c3, or maybe rook to rook to e2, rook to a2, again placing our rooks on the same file, or the a file, and again I think black can face some tactical problems. So after move e takes d5, here in the continuation queen to d7, we have now knight to d2, very important move. We want now to occupy both of the squares. These are very important outposts for our centralized knight. In the continuation, we have now bishop to d8, and now rook to a2. We have rook to b8, and now knight to e3. One of these knights is finally jumping here on c4 and cannot be anymore kicked away by this bishop, because the knight will be on the light square, and as I said, it cannot be, of course, attacked anymore by the dark square bishop of black. So f5, we have queen to e2, we have rook to b4, we have rook to a1. Finally, this rook battery is working. We have queen to b7, rook takes a4. Here we have rook takes a4. Even if you try here something like rook to b2, it's not a problem. We can take, of course, that's the main issue. We will give up here the rook for two minor pieces, and here after knight to c4, maybe you can take, but now your rook is hanging, you have to retreat. And in this scenario, I think again white is much better, because in the continuation we can try also here knight to e4, also knight to d6. You see this pawn is hanging, so it's not a good continuation here for black. So after move rook to a4, so we said rook takes b2 is not working, so that's why rook takes a4, and queen to b2. And it seems so that black is regrouped, because black has gained again an extra pawn. But again, I don't like this dark square bishop, and now it's even worse, because the dark square bishop is also protecting the knight on a5, and the knight is also on the edge of the board. So both of these minor pieces of blacks are not good. That's, I think, the most important thing to notice. And as a compensation, I think it's a great position for white. White has lost one pawn, but has now a better minor piece activity. So after queen takes b2, we have queen to d1, queen to b5, we have queen to a1, again building his battery. We have now g6, queen to a2, bishop to c7, h4, we have h6, queen to a3, king to h7, and now Stockfish is playing a couple of moves just in order to maybe improve the pieces on the board. Here after move rook to f8, we have knight to f3, we have a bishop to d8, and now queen to a2, and here bishop to c7. Maybe it was time, at least my Stockfish engine at home is suggesting this move, which I really like now when I watch the position more and more. At least, as I said, the Stockfish engine is suggesting, although it's a sacrifice, but at least this bishop will come into the game. At least the bishop can come on b6. That's the only way, I think, to improve this position of the dark square bishop. Somehow to play c4, getting the bishop on b6, getting the pieces more and more active, and suddenly maybe black has some kind of a game. But still, it's risky, because of course here d takes c4 will happen, everything is pretty much glued together. So as I said, it would be a temporarily pawn sacrifice, but just in order to maybe grab some kind of an activity. As I said, risky choice, but it was simply a Stockfish suggestion, and I wanted to, of course, tell you about here Stockfish idea in this position. So also for black here. So after move queen to a2, we have set bishop to c7. We have now c4. You see, you had your chance with c4. Now Stockfish is not allowing c4 anymore in the continuation of the game. All of these pawns are on light square, which is also very important to notice. These pawns cannot be, of course, attacked by this dark square bishop. So queen to b6, we have h5, we have bishop to d8, we have h takes g6, king to g6, rook to a3, h5, g3. Here we have queen to b4, and now knight to g2. You see the knights are also very good defensive pieces, and if something gets open and cleared, of course the knight can be again centralized, where it's of course improving its activity. So after move king to g2, we have king to g7, knight to g2, king to g7, king to h2. Even if you try something like f4 here, it's not so good. G takes f4, you can maybe try here e takes f4, but now queen to a1, it's risky. Okay, you're getting also some kind of an activity here for black, but it's also getting your own king a little bit naked. So pushing pawns on the king side is also risky choice here. After queen to a1, I think rook to a2, then maybe rook to e2 can be played. Then afterwards maybe something like queen to g1, knight to h4, getting the queen maybe on the g file. So when it comes to the attack, I think white is slightly faster, because still we have to say this knight is simply on the edge of the board. So here from move king to h2, rook to f7 was played by Houdini. Houdini didn't want to play the move f4 immediately. We have rook to a4, queen to c3, queen to e2, and now f4. We have again g takes f4, e takes f4, queen to d2, queen takes d2, and now knight to d2. Here Stockfish is going now into an endgame, because Stockfish noticed that nothing is wrong with this position, although the material is equal. We have here 3 versus 3 situation, but still this knight will move in one particular moment. When that happens, of course, then we can take out this one, and as I said, strategically white is of course much better here. So king to f6, we have king to h3, king to e5, knight to f3, never allowing here the king to come on this very active square on d4. We have king to f5, knight to h4, we have a check, knight to d2. We have again this idea, king to e5, but now this other knight is protecting of course the d4 square. Knight to f3 comes with the check, king to f5, and now knight to e4, a great centralized square for this knight. As I said, it cannot be any more kicked away by any minor piece. After move knight to e4, we have king, rook to d7, knight to d2, we have bishop to b6, we have rook to a1, bishop to d8, king to h2, and now of course the king is also getting towards the center. First Stockfish improves all of the pieces on the board. Here after move king to e2, king to f5, king to f3, king to e5, rook to h1, we have h4, now rook to a1, attacking the knight, king to f5, king to g2, and now king to h3, bishop to d8, again rook to a4, bishop to c7, and now knight to f3. After bishop to d8, finally knight takes h4, because after bishop to h4, it's not the point that we want to take out the bishop. We want to continue our bad bishop strategy. Of course, here a rook takes a5. Now, as promised, this is a weakness, this is a weakness, this is a weakness. All of these pawns of blacks are simply clear targets, so obviously a much better endgame here for white. So bishop to d8, rook takes a6, we have bishop to e7, rook to a8, bishop to d8, rook to b8, we have king to e5, king to g4, we have king to d4, and now finally rook to b3. Stockfish is not losing any pawns, although if you lose this one, then of course this one, but then you don't want to lose of course the d3 pawn, because if you lose this pawn, then the c4 is weakened, and afterwards of course the d5 pawn could be an object. So that's why rook to b3, keeping everything pretty much glued together. We have king to e5, rook to a3, rook to g7, king to f3, rook to d7, rook to a8, king to d4, and finally this king can escape here to e2 and finally protect the pawn on d3. Now the rook can play much more freely. Now the rook can be of course used as an attacking piece. You don't have to anymore protect your d3 pawn with the heavy artillery. So after move rook to e2, we have king to e5, king to d2, king to f5, f3, fixing the knight further, king to e5, king to c3, king to f5, d4 finally breaking through, c takes d4, king to d3, bishop to e7, and finally rook to g8, cutting off also the potential activity by the king. Here we have rook to a7, king takes d4, bishop to f6, knight takes f6, king to f6, and now after rook to f8, king to g5, rook to d8, a very important move. After rook to x6, king to g8, king to f6, rook to f8, king to e7, and finally after move rook takes f4, rook to a1 was played by Houdini. In this position Houdini resigned because it recognized of course this +2 situation, two extra pawns here for white, and black simply resigned. So brilliant game. I think this game had every element that we love to see in a chess game: opening preparations, middle game strategies, weak square positions, pawn breakthrough ideas, bad bishop strategies, endgame tactics, endgame ideas. Really brilliant game here by the fish, and that's why I decided to show one. As I said, this is not maybe a brilliant tactical game that we used to see by Stockfish, but I really love also this kind of game because they're showing us the great strategies of the Ruy Lopez, which is, as I said, one of the most popular popular openings of these days. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game like I did. If you want to see more positional brilliances and tactical mad games here played by Top Engines, check out my commented chat games played by computer series with some more great games played by Stockfish, Alpha Zero, Lila Zero, and many more. And if you want to see maybe humans battling it out in their best chess games, check out my commented chat games played by humans, the best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.